Hey, I'm Coach T. This is the second video in our little micro series on what tuples are in Python. If you like my headfirst practical approach to learning how to code in Python, I have one request for you, and that's just subscribe to the channel so I can see your support there, or even better, share the video with somebody else in your learning community or somebody else that you know who's learning Python and who might benefit from a little bit of an extra deep look into tuples. So that's it. I don't have a course to sell you. I don't write books. I don't have billable coaching hours, nothing like that. I just want to help other folks learn how to build cool stuff with software. So in this case, we're doing Python. At this point, the Affinity publisher playlist should be uploading too. So there's some neat things going on the channel. My goal is ultimately just to teach because I'm a teacher by trade and I just love the teaching and learning process. And that's it. With that said, with that minute out of the way, let's pick up right from where we left off in the last video, which was a faceplant trying to reassign the value of the first element in my list, or the zero place in my tuple. I keep saying list, I mean tuple. I'm working on it. So the issue that we ran into that we did not resolve in the last video is that tuple objects do not support item assignment, which means you cannot reassign a value to a tuple the way that you can in a list. Let me show you this by example. So if I have my list equals, and within the square brackets, I'm going to copy and paste all of the elements, and then I go to my tuple, but I'm going to change this to my list, and then I print my list 0. Can't see what I'm doing. And we're just going to comment this out. By the way, that's control backslash to comment things out in Visual Studio Code. So now I have my list declared. It's got all the same values as the tuple. And then I'm going to reassign the 0th value to coacht.com instead of just Coach T. By the way, that website, at least at the time of recording, doesn't exist. I don't know if I want to bother with that. So anyway, my list 0, and I'm going to delete that previous debugging, and I'm just going to run this sucker again, and now you'll see I get coacht.com, that reassigned value. You cannot do that in tuples. You cannot overwrite a tuple value once it is initialized. So let's comment this out and rerun this. We'll just rename this to tuple. And I'm going to get my error again, right? Because tuple objects do not support item assignment. Now, if you're just beginning with coding and with Python and you're getting into data collections, you might go, well, then what the hell is a tuple for? It has its uses, but it also has its limits. A tuple is really useful when you know in advance what the item should, or what the data collection should store. So for example, if you have a coordinate and you know that that coordinate is going to be displayed in a particular way, it is easier and more processing efficient to store it as a tuple than it is to store it in a list. It just takes less power. If you have a value that you know is not going to change, so the name of a building and then the address, you know it's not going to change, you can store it as a tuple, it will process faster. If you have something static, for lack of a better word, that you know the values won't change, then you can use a tuple because it's just going to be more resource efficient to keep it like that. But if it's something like an inventory or a contact card or a roster of students, or really anything that is possibly going to change, and you're not worried about the processing efficiency, you probably do want to use a list or a dictionary instead, because those are mutable where a tuple is immutable. If you're working with Pygame, though, you are going to have to get used to using tuples, because as you're drawing to the screen, it's going to be returning things and spitting out in tuples. It's going to be looking for that tuple data structure to figure out where on the screen to use. So again, coordinates, positioning, pointing, that kind of thing, very useful for tuples. My experience with Python outside of just writing Python is in tkinter, where I did use lists for creating trees of student data and stuff like that. And also in Pygame. I wrote several games in Pygame, following some tutorials and then going off on my own. And I had to do a lot of work with tuples. Now, if we do want to change a tuple, what we have to do is we have to overwrite the whole thing. So let me show you what that looks like. So very simply, I just adjusted the code on the screen. So now I got rid of the clutter from the list example, and I have a new tuple being declared right here. The new tuple has coacht.com, and then it's got all the same data. So when I run this, if this works, what I should see in the 0 element is the new data stored here in element 0 of my tuple, which has been overwritten. So let's run it and just take a look. What do we get? Boom, there it is, Coach T. So that does show you that there is a way to adjust the values in a tuple, but in order to do it, you have to overwrite the whole thing. That may not be ideal for you. So what can we do? Well, one of the best use cases for tuples is actually in the multiple return capacity of a tuple. That's probably a clumsy way of explaining that you can export multiple values from a function into a tuple and then unpack the tuple in the main body of your program to access those values. Let me show you what that looks like. Okay, sorry for the jumps. I got to keep pausing and unpausing the video as I go. So, all right, now we have a function on the screen called return x and y. It takes two parameters, x and y, and then it adds 1 to each, and it returns x and y. And actually, you know what? Just to be very clear, we're actually going to add 5 to y, just so that we don't get the exact same number and you know for sure that it's working. So, after I've defined my function return x and y, I am going to declare and initialize the variables x and y to each start with the value of 1. Then I'm going to create a new variable called new tuple, and on that I'm going to call return x and y and pass into that function the two values stored in x and y. And finally, I'm going to print the new tuple. So if this works the way that we think it would work, when we call return x and y, Python's attention is going to turn up here to return x and y. It's going to get those two values here, x, which starts as 1. It's going to add 1 to x and then return into that value. It's going to pass it there as part of a tuple. Notice the parentheses. And then also, it's going to take y and it's going to add 5 to y. So I should get a new tuple storing the values of 2 and 6. Yes. So, brief brain fart on the math. The big thing here to look for is this return keyword. Remember from the return video a couple weeks ago, but it's going to return not one value, but multiple packed into a single object. That's going to be a very important word going forward, because I do think I'm going to do some work with classes here on the Quick Code playlist. We're going to start talking about objects. So that's going to be its own thing, but I do want to just highlight it. It's not returning two values, it's returning two values stored in one object. So it's technically only returning one thing, which is the limitation on the return keyword from that video. But it's going to return an object that itself stores multiple values. So it gives us a clever way to get around the return value limitation. So let's run it. Let's see if the hypothesis works. Boom, 2 and 6. There it is. So we know now that you can return multiple values and you can act on them. In fact, instead of just printing them, what if we reassign x as new tuple 0 and we reassign y as new tuple 1. Sorry, got lost because I couldn't see the key on the keyboard. Okay, now if we print x and print y, and what we'll do is we'll do a format, or no, we'll just do the new value of x is plus x, like that. The new value of y is y, like that. And we will also print these here, and we'll do the original value. This way we're printing off the beginning and the ending, and we can see what ends up happening, because now I am unpacking this tuple and I'm saying, wait a second, okay, so the new tuple x and y here, that's what I want. So let's run it and see if we get the reassigned values into x and y. Oh, what did I do? Oh, is it got to be a comma? This might be a C# to Python confusion. Nope. Okay, I just need to pause the video and figure out why I can't concatenate that way. Okay, all right, fixed it. So the new value of y is 6. There it is. I just forgot to put the commas in there. In C# you concatenate with a plus. So anyway, so the original value of x is 1, the original value of y is 1, the new value of x is 2, and the new value of y is 6. So now we know for sure that this function is returning and properly unpacking these values. To translate that into real world experience, imagine that we had done that with something like Pygame, where the object had started at position 1, 1, so probably somewhere up here in the screen, top left, since this is the 0, 0 origin. And now we've translated it down 2 on the x and 6, so it's come down maybe down here, right? So there is one of the values of returning multiple values. And we also showed you a way to unpack and reassign the values of a tuple to get it out of a more complicated computation. It's a whole lot for a 13-minute video, but I hope that this was useful in showing you some of the use cases of tuples and assigning and accessing those values and then acting on them. Because when I was first learning how to use tuples, I was like, why would I ever need this versus a list? Well, we can use it to return multiple values out of a function, and then we can do things with them. We could even assign these into a list, right? Watch this. We could say new list equals new tuple 0, new tuple 1. And then we can say for each element in new list nope, I'm thinking of C#. For element in new list, print element. I was thinking of C# there, right? So now we're not even working with the tuple, we're back to a list. There it is, 2 and 6, right? because I'm getting the new tuple values after the return. So you can use a function to return multiple values, and then you can really start to use it in complicated and new ways. So tuple is not a dead end. It's not useless, even though at first it might seem like those constraints are a pain in the rear end, but the multiple return trick makes them super useful. So there you go. If you appreciate this kind of head-first approach, I know the video is a little bit long, so I hope you'll forgive me on that. But consider subscribing to the channel or sharing this video with somebody else, and leave a comment. Tell me what you're working on in Python. I'd love to know what you're working on and what you're building. With that said, I'm happy to have talked with you and taught you a little bit about tuples today, and I hope that you join me in the next video on Python. I'm Coach T, and I will see you next time.